They made a fatal mistake the night they forgot the security camera was still recording. My name is Maya Callahan. I am a flight nurse with the 82nd Airborne Division's Medical Support Unit, stationed out of Fort Bragg, North Carolina. I have pulled soldiers out of burning vehicles in the Kandahar Valley. I have kept men alive with my bare hands at 30,000 feet. I have been shot at, mortared, and stranded. Not once did I cry. But the night my mother-in-law looked me in the eye, ripped the patch off my uniform sleeve, and said, "You will never be good enough for this family," I felt something crack open in my chest that no amount of training had ever prepared me for. I need you to understand something before I tell you the rest of this. I am not a victim. I have never been a victim. What I am is a witness. And the most important thing a witness can do is remember every detail, because details, in the end, are what set the record straight. So let me start at the beginning. I grew up in Hazard, Kentucky. Population just under 5,000. My father worked the coal mines for 31 years until the day the company closed the shaft and handed him a cardboard box with his personal items inside. My mother cleaned rooms at the Holiday Inn off Highway 15. We were not poor in the way that breaks people. We were poor in the way that teaches you exactly what you are made of. I joined the Army at 19 because a recruiter came to my high school and told me I could become a nurse without taking on a single dollar of debt. I raised my right hand the following April, and I have never looked back. By the time I was 28, I had 2 deployments, a combat medical badge, and a set of wings I had earned the hard way. I met my husband, Daniel Hargrove, at a military fundraiser in Raleigh. He was not in the service. He was there because his father, Richard Hargrove, was a retired 2-star general who sat on the board of the organization hosting the event. Daniel was 32, tall, quiet in a way I mistook for thoughtful, and he looked at me across a room full of dress uniforms like I was the only person worth looking at. We dated for 14 months. He drove down to Bragg every weekend he could. He sent me letters, actual handwritten letters, when I was deployed the second time. I still have all of them in a shoebox under my bed. We got married in September in a small ceremony outside Asheville. My father wore the only suit he owned. My mother cried through the entire ceremony. It was the happiest day of my life. The problems started approximately 72 hours later, when we arrived at the Hargrove family estate in Pinehurst for what Daniel described as a casual welcome dinner. There is nothing casual about the Hargrove family. The house sits on 14 acres of manicured grounds behind a wrought iron gate with the family crest embossed on each post. The main structure is 3 stories of colonial revival architecture, with a formal dining room that seats 20 and a library that smells like old money and older grudges. Richard Hargrove built his reputation on discipline, sacrifice, and service. His wife Eleanor built hers on maintaining appearances at any cost. When I walked through that door in my nicest dress, a navy wrap dress I had bought specifically for the occasion, Eleanor looked me up and down the way you look at something you found on the bottom of your shoe. "Daniel told us you're from Kentucky," she said. Not a question. A verdict. "Yes, ma'am," I said. "Hazard County." She smiled with her mouth only. How charming. Daniel's sister, Vivienne, was worse. Vivienne was 35, unmarried, and had apparently decided years ago that her primary purpose in life was to protect the Hargrove name from anyone she deemed unworthy. She had a law degree from Duke that she wielded like a personal weapon. She wore her contempt the way other women wore perfume, lightly applied but impossible to ignore. The first dinner was survivable. Cold, performative, and deeply uncomfortable, but survivable. I smiled. I answered questions. I complimented the food. I told Eleanor that her home was beautiful, which it was, even if the woman inside it was not. I drove home that night and told Daniel it would get better. He agreed. We were both wrong. Over the next 8 months, the Hargrove women constructed a campaign against me that I can only describe as methodical. It was not loud. It was not obvious. It was the kind of warfare that leaves no fingerprints. Eleanor would invite us for Sunday dinners, and then make comments about how military wives typically settle down after they leave service, implying, never directly stating, that she expected me to resign my commission once Daniel and I started a family. Vivienne would ask me questions at the table about my little nursing job with a tone that suggested she found my career both baffling and faintly embarrassing. When Daniel's cousin got engaged to a woman who worked in finance, Eleanor threw her a lavish brunch the following weekend. When we announced that I had been promoted to senior flight nurse and selected for a specialized trauma program at Womack Army Medical Center, Eleanor nodded and changed the subject to the country club's upcoming renovation. I watched all of it. I filed all of it. I said nothing, because Daniel kept telling me they would come around, and I loved him enough to believe it. What I did not know, what I would not learn until much later, was that Vivienne had been working on Daniel long before I entered the picture. She had his ear in a way that I did not fully appreciate. She called him 3 or 4 times a week. She forwarded him articles. She planted seeds so small and so carefully that neither Daniel nor I noticed them taking root. The first time I noticed something had shifted in Daniel was in February, 7 months into our marriage. I had been on a 48-hour trauma rotation and came home exhausted to find him distant, barely present. When I asked what was wrong, he said nothing. When I pressed, he said he had just been thinking. About what? About whether we had rushed things. I sat with that sentence for a long time. We worked through it, or I thought we did. He apologized. He said he was tired. I chose to believe him, but something had changed behind his eyes, and I felt it every day after that, a subtle withdrawal, like a tide going out so slowly, you almost don't notice until you're standing on dry sand wondering where the water went. The night everything collapsed was a Saturday in late April. Daniel had been called out of state on a work project. He managed commercial real estate development for a firm in Charlotte and was supposed to be in Nashville for 10 days. My unit was between deployments, and I had a rare stretch of days off. Eleanor called that Friday and invited me to a family dinner the following evening, emphasizing that she was trying to make more of an effort, that she wanted us to have a real relationship. I should have said no. I did not say no, because I was still trying. Because Daniel was still asking me to try. Because I had been raised to believe that you do not quit on family, even when family makes it very, very hard to stay. I arrived at the Hargrove estate at 6:30 on Saturday evening wearing my dress uniform. I had come directly from a unit commemoration ceremony at Bragg, and there had not been time to change. I was aware that showing up in uniform to a civilian dinner might read as formal or even performative, but I had texted Eleanor to explain, and she had said it was fine. It was not fine. The look on Eleanor's face when she opened the door told me the text had been a trap. Vivienne was already there, along with 2 of Eleanor's friends from the Junior League, women in their 60s, with steel-set hair and the kind of social confidence that comes from never once having been told they were not enough. They looked at my uniform the way tourists look at something in a museum, with interest, but without recognition of what it actually cost. Dinner began pleasantly enough. I kept my answers short. I listened more than I spoke. I was doing everything right. Then Eleanor's friend, a woman named Patricia, asked me how long I planned to keep playing soldier. The table went quiet. I set down my fork. I'm a flight nurse with the 82nd Airborne, I said evenly. I've done 2 combat deployments. I don't consider that playing. Patricia laughed softly, as if I had said something both predictable and tiresome. Of course, dear. Vivienne, who had been watching me all night the way a cat watches a bird through glass, leaned forward and said, "What Patricia means is, at some point, you have to decide what kind of wife you want to be. Daniel needs a partner who is present, not someone who disappears for months at a time and comes back changed." "I come back the same," I said. "Do you?" Vivienne said, "because Daniel doesn't seem to think so." And there it was, the seed, finally broken through the surface. I looked at her. "What has Daniel told you?" Vivienne smiled. "Enough." Eleanor stood up at that moment and began clearing plates that did not need clearing, which was her way of signaling that the conversation was over on her terms. I sat in my chair and breathed the way they teach you in combat stress training. 4 counts in, hold 4, 4 counts out. I was doing everything I could to hold the line. Then Vivienne walked behind my chair on her way to the kitchen, and as she passed, she reached down and tore the 82nd Airborne patch from my sleeve. The sound of the Velcro separating was very small. The silence that followed it was enormous. I stood up from my chair so fast it scraped across the hardwood. "Give that back," I said. Vivienne held it up between 2 fingers like it was something she was considering throwing away. "It's just a patch, Maya." "It is not just a patch. It's a piece of fabric," she said. "And honestly, you wearing this to a dinner party is embarrassing. You're not on duty. You're at a family dinner. Or have they trained that distinction out of you too?" Eleanor said nothing. Patricia and her companions said nothing. The room held its breath. And then Eleanor, who had been standing at the edge of the room with her arms crossed, said very quietly, "Vivienne is right. You perform this identity, Maya, because without it, you have nothing. No family name, no background, no That's enough, I said. Is it? Eleanor said. Daniel deserves someone who fits this family. You have never fit this family. You walk in here in your uniform like it's armor, because you know that without it, we would have nothing to talk about. You are a coal miner's daughter from a town no one has ever heard of, and no amount of patches and medals changes where you came from. I have been in situations where I needed to make a decision in under 2 seconds and lives depended on getting it right. I have held that kind of stillness before. I held it now. I reached across the table, picked up my jacket from the back of my chair, took the patch from Vivienne's hand without a word, and walked toward the front hallway. What I did not know, as I walked out of that dining room, was that Vivienne had set her phone against the fruit bowl on the sideboard at the beginning of dinner, recording video. She had planned to capture me losing my composure, screaming, crying, saying something she could use. She had planned to send it to Daniel as evidence of exactly the kind of wife she had been telling him I was. What she had not planned was that I would leave without giving her what she needed. And what neither of us knew was that the security camera Eleanor had installed in the dining room hallway, the one connected to the home monitoring system, had recorded everything. Every word, every face. The moment Vivienne's hand reached down and tore that patch from my arm, that camera had been installed 18 months earlier, after a piece of Eleanor's jewelry went missing during a catered event. The footage auto-uploaded to a cloud account every 48 hours. Eleanor had forgotten it was there. I did not know it was there. But it was there. I drove back to Bragg in silence. I did not call Daniel. I did not call my mother. I sat in the parking lot of my apartment complex for 45 minutes and stared at the patch in my hand. My grandfather had served in Vietnam. My uncle had done 2 tours in Iraq. My father had tried to enlist and been turned away for a heart condition that broke something in him that never fully healed. When I put on this uniform for the first time, my father had stood in front of me and put both hands on my shoulders and said, "You're carrying more than just yourself now, Maya. You remember that." I remembered it. I drove inside, laid the uniform carefully across the back of the chair, and sat down at my kitchen table with a glass of water and my own thoughts for a very long time. The next morning, Daniel called from Nashville. He sounded distracted, clipped. I told him what had happened. I told him calmly, without dramatics, the way I would brief a commanding officer, facts in sequence. Actions taken. Outcome. There was a long pause on his end. "Maya," he said finally, "my sister says you were incredibly hostile." I looked at the wall for a moment. "Your sister tore the patch off my uniform. She says you provoked her." "Daniel, I'm just telling you what she said." "I know what she said," I told him. "I'm telling you what happened. And I need you to decide which one of us you believe." Another long pause. "I think you two just don't understand each other." I knew then. Not fully grief takes time to arrive completely, but I knew the shape of what was coming. "Come home when your project is done," I said. "We'll talk then." He said he would. He did not. What happened instead was that 3 days later, I received a text from an unfamiliar number containing a video clip. The clip was 9 seconds long. It showed me standing abruptly from my chair at the Hargrove dinner table, face tight, jaw set, hand reaching across the table. Vivienne's voice in the background said, clearly audible. She just grabbed it and stormed off. We were all frightened. The clip had been edited. The 30 seconds before it, where Vivienne's hand reached down and tore the patch from my arm, had been removed. I looked at that 9-second clip for a long time. Then I called the one person I knew who could help me. Her name is Captain Denise Okafor. She is my closest friend in the unit, and before she was a nurse, she spent 4 years as a military intelligence analyst. She does not panic. She does not speculate. She finds facts the way other people find keys, methodically, without drama, starting from the last place she was certain. I told Denise everything. She listened without interrupting. "Okay," she said when I finished. "Did the Hargrove house have cameras?" I thought about it. Eleanor mentioned something about a security upgrade after a break-in. "I think there are cameras in the hallways." "Find out," Denise said. "Because if there are cameras, there's footage. I don't have access to their system." "You don't need to," Denise said. "Does Eleanor use a home monitoring service?" "Because those systems auto-archive. The footage belongs to the account holder, but if there's ever a legal dispute..." "Denise, I'm just saying. Document everything you have. Write down the timeline. Keep the original text you received and find out about those cameras. I wrote everything down that night. Date, time, sequence of events, exact words, as I remembered them. I had been trained to write incident reports. I did it automatically, clinically. The way you do when you have learned that memory without documentation is just a story. And stories can be disputed. I also, on a quiet instinct I could not fully explain, sent Eleanor a text the following morning. I kept it brief. I wanted to apologize if my presence in uniform had caused any discomfort, and I hoped we could speak soon about the evening. A courtesy text. Nothing more. Eleanor responded within the hour, which surprised me. She wrote that she appreciated my reaching out, that she had reviewed the security footage from the hallway to make sure her homemaid had locked up properly before leaving that evening, and that she was sorry the dinner had gone the way it did. She had reviewed the footage, which meant the footage existed, which meant it had captured the hallway, which meant it may well have captured the dining room entrance, the sideboard, and Vivian's phone propped against the fruit bowl. I forwarded Eleanor's text to Denise. Denise called me back in 4 minutes. She just confirmed the footage exists? Denise said. I know, Maya. She doesn't realize what she confirmed. I know that too. I did not contact a lawyer immediately. I want to be clear about that, because what happened next was not a calculated legal strategy. It was something much simpler. I called my father. He picked up on the second ring, the way he always does, as if he has been sitting beside the phone waiting for me specifically. I told him everything. He did not interrupt once. When I finished, there was a silence that felt like something being carefully held. Baby girl, he said finally, tell me. She used to say the truth doesn't need your help. It just needs time. I held the phone against my ear and looked at the patch on my table. Okay, Dad, I said. You didn't lose anything tonight that's actually yours, he said. You remember that. Everything that's yours is still yours. I want to tell you that I was fine after that. I was not fully fine. I was functional, which is sometimes the best you can do. And I have learned to treat functional as enough when it needs to be. Daniel came home from Nashville 9 days after he was supposed to. He had extended his project. He had not called to tell me. He walked through our front door looking like a man who had already made a decision but had not yet found the words. We sat at the kitchen table and I let him talk. He said he loved me. He said he had been doing a lot of thinking. He said that he felt like there was a fundamental incompatibility between my world and his family's world, and that he was not sure that was something that could be bridged. I asked him if Vivian had suggested those words to him. He looked at the table. Daniel, I said, your sister tore the patch off my uniform and then sent you an edited video clip to make it look like I had been the aggressor. I have the original text with the timestamp. I have the full context of the evening. And your mother's security system recorded the entire dinner. He looked up at me. There is footage, I said, of your sister removing the unit patch from my dress uniform sleeve. There is footage of your mother telling me I have nothing without my rank. There is footage of both of them, in their own home, conducting themselves in a way that your grandfather, a 2-star general, would find unconscionable. The color left Daniel's face. That footage was uploaded automatically to your mother's home monitoring account, I said. I did not access it. I did not request it. Your mother herself confirmed it exists, in writing, in a text message to me. I slid my phone across the table. He read the exchange slowly. What I want, I said, is for you to watch that footage before you make any decision about this marriage. Not for my sake, for yours, because you deserve to make this choice based on what actually happened, not on what you have been told happened. He was quiet for a long time. How do I access it? Ask your mother, I said. That is the only thing I am asking you to do. I will not tell you that the following 2 weeks were easy. They were not. Daniel requested the footage from Eleanor, which, by her own written confirmation of its existence, she could not plausibly deny. Eleanor initially claimed the dining room was not covered. Richard, who had been silent through all of this in a way that I had begun to understand was not neutrality but shame, pulled the system account himself. The dining room entrance was covered. The footage showed everything. Vivian's hand. The patch. Eleanor's words. The stillness of my face as I stood and left without screaming. Richard Hargrove watched that footage in his study alone, and then he called his daughter into the room, and whatever was said between them in that hour, I was not present for and did not need to be. He called me directly the following morning. His voice on the phone was the voice of a man who had spent his career demanding accountability from others and had just been asked to apply that same standard to his own household. "Captain Callahan?" He said. He used my rank, which I noticed and did not mention. "I owe you an apology. What you experienced in this home was not acceptable. It was not in keeping with the values of this family, regardless of what you may have been led to believe those values are. I am sorry." I thanked him. I meant it. He asked me if I intended to take any further action. I told him I had not decided. He said he understood, and that whatever I decided, he would consider it warranted. I thought about my grandfather, my father's cardboard box, my mother's hands at the end of a long shift, red from cleaning products and work. "General Hargrove," I said, "I don't want anything from your family except for your son to know the truth. That's all I ever wanted." There was a long pause. "He knows," he said quietly. "Daniel and I went to counseling. I will not dress that up as easy or romantic or the beginning of a triumphant love story, because I do not know yet how this story ends. What I know is that we are both still showing up, which is the most honest thing I can tell you." Vivian sent me a text in June that said only, "I'm sorry." I read it several times. I have not yet responded. I am still deciding what a response would mean, and I have learned to take my time with decisions that matter. Eleanor has not contacted me directly. I do not expect her to. Some people are incapable of apology and are not worth the energy of waiting for one. What I have done is go back to work. I have pulled people out of burning vehicles and kept them alive at altitude and written reports and showed up and done the job. The job I was doing before any of this began and will be doing long after it ends. My father called me last week. He asked how I was doing in the way that means he already knows and just wants to hear my voice confirm it. "I'm good, Dad," I told him. "You know what your grandmother would say?" "Tell me." "She'd say you didn't pick that fight," he said. "But you didn't walk away from it either." She'd say, "That's the definition of a person." I looked out the window of my apartment at the flat Carolina pine land stretching out toward the base, the early morning light making the whole world look clean and possible. "Tell Grandma I said thank you," I said. He laughed. "She already knows." I hung up and put on my uniform and drove to the base, and the morning opened up ahead of me the way mornings do when you have decided, once and for all, that you are exactly who you are supposed to be.